Right, so for those of you that have got the Helios 650 Enterprise D kit and are picking up these masks, or have already picked up these masks, thank you very much. I'm going to do my best to sort of demonstrate how the masks are designed to be used, particularly the four-tone set for the really complicated Generations paint scheme, because it is fairly straightforward, but it's easier to see it than it is to describe it. I've already got a set of masks that do this at the 1400 scale for the AMT kit, and there are more in-depth videos on my YouTube channel already about that. So I highly recommend going and watching those, because obviously the part layout, or like the mask layouts for the sheets that you'll get for the 650, will be different to what's being shown on this 1400 videos. The fundamental basic processes and methods are the same. So I do recommend, if you haven't used these masks with the transfer film in the past, or you haven't done that before, you've got no experience, I do recommend watching those videos, just sort of familiarize yourself with the process. So with that being said, I'm just going to describe what you'll get in the mask set. So the most important thing, other than the vinyl sheets obviously, is that you know what is on what sheet. And the easiest way to illustrate that is I've made these printouts that and these are how each cut sheet is laid out. So each cut sheet is identified. If you've just got the two-tone set, you'll get 10 sheets. They're A3, double the size of this. Obviously this is A4 paper, so you'll get 10 A3 sheets of vinyl, and each sheet will be identified, cut into it with an M1, M2, all the way going up through to M10. So you'll get this in the sets, this printout, and it basically shows you, as you can see, what is on what sheet. So it's quite important that you take a bit of time and familiarize yourself with what's on what. And I've tried my best to keep the sections of the ship together, i.e. one side of the saucer, upper saucer is on one part of the sheet and spreading over, but because of trying to maximize efficiency with the cut sheet and limited waste, there will be a little bit of mixing up going on. Obviously you've got nacelle parts here in with the upper saucer on the M2, then you go back to the upper saucer. So just pay special attention to that. Make sure you know what you're using at the time, particularly these nacelle sheets, because the pattern actually isn't identical from one side to the other, one nacelle to the other. So I've identified that. So on the M2, for example, it's the starboard upper nacelle. Okay, and then on like M4, it's the port upper nacelle. And as we go through, you can see everything's labelled with a 10B, 11A, for example, and I'll get to that in a minute. Lower nacelle parts, these are symmetrical, so it doesn't matter. You can put this on, these parts on either side of whatever lower nacelle, doesn't matter. So yeah, and you've got like upper secondary hull 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so you get the idea. Now if you've got the four-tone set, you're going to get 30 sheets of A3 vinyl. That's 10 sheets for the main set, 10 sheets for the blue highlight set, 10 sheets for the grey highlight set. And I've tried to maintain consistency through each of the sets of cut sheets. So the blue set will be laid out the same, but it will have B1. The grey set will have the same layout, and it will be G1. So the corresponding parts will be on the same cut sheets, if that makes sense. So you're not having to constantly cross-reference between different sheet layouts, because it will just get really complicated. So for example, this part for that specific part of the upper saucer there will be on the same sheet between the main sheet, the blue highlight sheet, and the grey highlight sheet. It's always going to be there on sheet 1, if you understand. You'll get it. You'll understand once you see when you see all three sets out in front of you. You'll realise that they're laid out in the same way. I've probably over-explained that and confused it, but it'll make sense when you get the sets in hand. Anyway, so that explains the cut sheet layouts. And now also included are the layout, like the application maps. So this tells you where all of these identified segments actually end up going on the ship. So again, good example, on the main upper saucer, you can see there's 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A, 5A, 6A, and that corresponds to 1A, 2A, 3, 4, 5A. Yep, makes sense? Okay, fine, good. You can see it goes all the way around, 1A through B, all the way through 14. So it's important to not get too far ahead of yourself and start cutting out parts of these masks from the sheet. You'll lose your place quite quickly, specifically because some of these are very similar shaped. You don't want to get these two mixed up. Although the large, like overall shape is the same or nearly the same, close enough to get mixed up anyway, the actual Aztec that's cut into it, they're not the same as each other. So you don't want to get those parts mixed up. Yeah, you don't want to put 4A there and 3A there. You want to make sure you're maintaining the sequence. So what you want to do is when you're cutting out this part, for example, out of the cut sheet, don't cut them all out. Just cut the one piece out and then turn it over, and with a pen or whatever, just write on the back of it what it is: 4A, 5A, 2B, 13A, 12B, etc. That way then you can't get it mixed up. All right. So it's pretty self-explanatory. The dorsal sides are the hardest parts to apply, just because of the absolutely wacky compound curves that are going on in that section. So I'll split them up into 3 sections. It's probably easier if you start with the upper parts, D1 and D4, and then work your way down through the neck, being careful to try and maintain that line. Now, full disclosure, they are tricky to apply that way. That's just the nature of the beast, unfortunately. There's no way to design masks that will just fall on without a little bit of finessing here and there. So you're just going to have to take your time. So what I would suggest is, like particularly if you haven't used this sort of masking system before, is tackle these last or towards the back end. Do some of the more simple shapes first, like the saucer, the back end of the pylons, places, relatively large flat areas, just until you got a little bit of more familiarity and a little bit more skill using the set, and then you should be in a better position to tackle these with less issues and headache. Like I say, there's nothing I can do to avoid that. No matter how you mask these, they're going to be a pain. So there we go. That's probably too much talking already about these layout maps. The nacelles are a little bit more complicated. Well, it looks complicated, but it's really actually not. These parts go onto the nacelle roots, that wedge shape that sits underneath the nacelle that actually anchors it down onto the top of the pylon strut. Yeah, it's fairly self-explanatory once you start actually using the masks on the parts in hand. Like I said, it's difficult for me to explain this because I can't actually use the parts to paint them, because I borrowed the kit from Andy at Scale Electronics. So yeah, there we go. So that's a quick overview about what you'll get with these printouts and what they are. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So I'm just going to get set up for a quick paint demo. Obviously I can't paint any of the kit parts, but I can paint like a sheet of plastic. So I've got a part prepped. So let me get reset up and I'll go through the intended process for using these masks if you've not used masks like this before. So give me 2 seconds. Okay, so I've just base coated this sheet of styrene. I primed it first and then base coated it with the darker of the blue hull colours. Now, since I'm doing the Generations paint scheme for this demo, because I want to demo the full 4-tone mask set application process, I'm going with dark blue. If you're going with the TNG colours, start off with the green hull colour, mask those off, and then go over that with the main base grey colour. The idea is that you get 3 sets of masks if you're using the Generation sets. As I said previously, and as you probably already know, you get your masks for the main pattern, and then you get a set of masks to give you the blue highlight pattern over the main, and a set of masks to do the grey highlight over the grey. So if you've never used transfer film before, it will take a little bit of getting used to, but once you've got the technique down, you'll find that you're saving an absolute ton of time. It is by far the quickest way to do this sort of paint scheme, particularly when you've got super complex and quite fine designs to get, to make sure they will stay registered to each other, and you've got large sections of masks that need to register together. Doing it with the transfer film is by far the best way to do it. So you might find the process and the technique and the method a little bit tricky to get used to start off with. Bear with it, persevere. It's really not that difficult. It just takes a little bit of time to develop like the process or the technique, but it's not hard. And you'll soon realise the benefits of doing it this way. So what I'm going to do is paint this lower section of the pylon wing and half of the surrounding lower section of the saucer section that sits near the captain's yacht. So they're nice busy patterns, and it'd be a good demonstration of this set. So let's get on with applying these masks and spray a bit of paint. I've included 6 A4 sheets of transfer film. These are just some leftover offcuts that I use for other stuff, but it's the same film that you'll be getting. I highly recommend that you use transfer film for all of the masks. So the main pattern and the highlight patterns, just use the transfer film, because when you start using large sections of vinyl at a time, it's really easy for things to, if you're trying to put them down one at a time, it's really easy to get things not quite aligned. If you were only using the two-tone set, it's not a deal breaker. If you want to go that route and apply them manually, you can align them with each other as you go. But if you were to place all these down and without using the transfer film, not only is it going to take you a hell of a lot longer to do that, you're also likely to not get them exactly positioned to where they are on the cut sheets. And then when you come to apply the highlight layers, they won't register with the main pattern, because by putting them down manually, with the best will in the world, you're never going to get them in exactly the right place. You're going to put them in slightly different places, and it will really show when you start overlapping the subsequent layers. They just won't register, and they won't line up with the corresponding shapes in the main pattern. So and also using the transfer film helps you keep alignment between adjacent sections. So you can apply this mask first with the transfer film. You know that everything is in the right place. Then you get the next set with the transfer film, and you can do a little bit of fine adjustment and make sure you've got your alignment just right before you finally press it down and put it down onto the ship. So yeah, not to beat a dead horse about this, but use the transfer sheet for all of the masking throughout all of the sets. It's going to save you a lot of time. You'll get a better result in the end, and that's the way they were designed to be used. So that's what I shall say about that. So let's get this main mask set. So again, because we're using large sections of vinyl that need to register with other large sections of vinyl quite accurately, I recommend not weeding these on the sheet. I recommend placing these whole onto the ship, getting all of the sections that butt up to those in whatever area you're working on, and then weed after the fact once they're on the surface. You'll find that you'll get better alignment between the sections, and it'll just be a bit easier to deal with. Okay. You can do it whichever way you want. Obviously, it's not mandatory. If you think you're going to get a little bit mixed up, or you'd rather do the weeding while they're on the sheet because you don't want to potentially catch the paint job on the ship on the surface of the model, that's fine. No problem with that at all. Just bear in mind that you might have a trickier time getting the alignment lined up between the sections, like the adjacent sections to one another. Just take your time, you'll probably be fine. I think doing it this way, it avoids some problems that outweigh the problems that it may cause. So if that makes sense. Right, so if you've never used transfer film before, it's just a clear sheet of sort of self-adhesive, and the idea is that the tack of this sheet isn't quite as much as the tack of this sheet. So when you apply the transfer sheet onto the vinyl, the tack of the transfer sheet is enough so you can remove the backing paper, but then when you apply that to your surface, the stickiness of the vinyl is greater than the stickiness of the transfer sheet. So when you peel the film, the vinyl is left in place. Okay, so give it a good rub like that. Flip it over, and then let's make sure I'm in shot. Yeah. Then start on one corner and start peeling it back. Now, the trick to using transfer film is, because it's quite low tack, what you might find is that some of the vinyl doesn't want to let go, doesn't quite want to let go. And you can see that. It wants to stay on the backing sheet. Now, there's a couple of things that are causing that. I won't go into it. But basically, what you want to do to make this go as easy as possible is you want to roll that sheet back so you get a tight curl on the receding sort of part of the sheet, and then what that will do is it will peel off the vinyl that's being stubborn here, just through like physics, I guess. The vinyl will unwrap itself from that tight turn, from that tight curve, and it will stay put. Now, if you get a piece that is stubborn and it wants to stick, or for whatever reason it's staying put on the sheet, all you need to do is just roll it back forward, just burnish it back down again, and then pull the sheet back. Okay, obviously if it's a new piece of transfer sheet, then the stickiness of its adhesive is going to make this part of the process go a bit easier, because it's going to grab the vinyl a bit harder. So that's a good example of where the vinyl wants to stay put on the sheet. So, and there's lots of little lines there, so it's critical that I get these back in position without overlapping and making a mess of that. So all I'm going to do is just roll it forward again, just press out where those are, and there they go. They're in position on the transfer film, they've let go. So again, I'm probably making this look a bit easier than it is in sort of practice, but it's just because I've got a lot of experience using this vinyl and this transfer sheet method. So give it some time. If you've not done this before, it can get a bit frustrating, but honestly, as with all things, practice makes perfect. And once you've got the technique down, you'll start going through at a rapid pace, and you'll realise that, wow, the benefits of using this really outweigh the pain of going through the learning curve. So that's our entire vinyl sheet ready to go. So this is my model part proxy. So in real application, you would take your time and get your alignment to like a physical feature, or like a datum line that you've added to the ship, like a pencil line, or an adjacent section of vinyl that's already been applied. Get your alignment where you need it. Once you're happy, just smooth it out. And now you peel back your transfer using the same technique. So you're rolling it back. Any parts of the vinyl that don't want to come up, you just roll the transfer sheet forward again, burnishing it as you go. See, I'm having a bit of issue with some of these little parts I want to lift up with the transfer film. That's because this transfer film is still quite new, and the adhesive on the back of it is still quite tacky. You can use the same sheet of transfer film repeatedly. They will last many uses. So actually the 6 A4 sheets I've given you is more than enough. You should have plenty of leftovers when you've finished the entire ship. But as the tack sort of degrades over several uses, what you'll find is this part of the process will be a bit easier because the tack of the transfer sheet won't be quite hard enough to peel the vinyl back off of the surface of the model. But the inverse of that means, because the tack of this has started to sort of back off a little bit, you might find it a little bit harder to remove the backing sheet. So it's sort of a seesaw thing where you start to benefit one side and then start getting harder or some other issues on the other side of the seesaw, if that makes sense. If it gets to the point where you really can't, you're spending a lot of time trying to get the vinyl off of the backing sheet and they just won't stay put, they want to stay on the backing sheet, just discard your transfer sheet, cut a new piece, and move on from there. So I hope that makes sense. So that's our main pattern. That's our main pattern applied. Now, if we were continuing to paint the rest of the wing, I would leave these unweeded, apply the adjacent parts to whatever area I've decided I'm going to tackle, mask that whole area, and then weed from there. So since this is the only area that I'm going to be doing this, I'll leave that as it is, and we'll put down this saucer part for the main masks. So we'll just repeat the process. Just put that out of the way. Now I'm going to use the same piece of transfer film that I used to apply that pylon wing there. It should be big enough. Just about. So burnish it down, flip it over. Again, I've identified it as the main pattern just so I don't get it mixed up. It can be a little bit tricky to get started because you're relying on the material, like the backing paper, rolling back on itself. But once you've got enough rolled back, it does start to get easier. I'm just using the tweezers here so my hands aren't quite in the way quite so much. So there we go. Now I've got enough to actually get my fingers on and start rolling it back. So again, I'm maintaining that tight curve, that tight radius on the receding paper, and that is doing two things really. I'm actually burnishing these vinyl parts that are below my fingers as I'm going back, but again, what it's doing is it's encouraging the vinyl to unwrap from that tight radius as you go. So just roll over. There's a part there that wants to come up, so I'm just going to burnish it down, following sort of the natural contour of the mask. Couple of parts there lifted up because I lifted the paper straight up. Another technique you can use is you sort of, it's hard to describe, you sort of slip your fingers back whilst pulling the paper with it. It's a technique that I use, just it's purely developed because I use these masks a lot. It goes fast, but it's not, you'll probably develop your own way of doing it, but there we go. No vinyl left on the backing paper, that can go in recycled paper bin, and we're ready to put this down on our saucer proxy. So we'll put it just there. Again, on the actual ship, you would take time to align this with any kind of datum that you've given yourself because of the lack of physical features on the Helios kit. or any physical features that may be there, or any previously applied pieces of vinyl that this will sort of register into. So, and then we peel this back. So as you can see, it's peeling off a little easier than that one did, and that's because we've used this piece of transfer sheet already. So we're already seeing a bit of an easier job of getting the vinyl to stay put. So there we go. Put that aside, keep that for next. If you do find that a piece of mask has shifted like that, just shifted a little bit, you can amend that with a pair of tweezers or whatever. It might end up being that that's a part that gets weeded out anyway, but just for now, we'll put it back where it needs to be, because you never know. We might need to know, or we might be relying on the position of that mask for something else. Right, so now all there's left to do is to identify which of these are staying put and which ones are being weeded. For that, you need to do a little bit of legwork for yourself. Go online, get as much reference as you possibly can. Reference is key, and identify where the grey panels are and where the blue panels are. So I'm just going to go through and weed the grey areas and leave the blue ones in place, and come back to you once that's done, because nobody wants to see that. It's pretty easy stuff. All right, so see you in a second. Right, there we go. That's the main pattern weeded and ready to go. Obviously, once this is covered with the main hull grey, the mask will be removed, and then everything you can see that's grey here at the moment will actually be blue, obviously. So yeah, I've just outlined in masking tape where the perimeter of these shapes are, because it will just illustrate it a bit better in the next step. So I'm going to get the main grey, whole grey, spray it over, give it a bit to cure off, and then we'll get these masks removed and move on to the next step. Grey base coat is on. Just start pulling up some of these. Apologies if my head gets in the way, I can't see what the camera's looking at. I'll just do a few of these just to indicate, and then I'll get rid of the rest off camera, and we'll move on to the next layer. There we go. Let's just peel off this thin pinstripes. That always looks pretty nice. There we go. So you get the idea. I'm just going to crack on, get rid of all these, and we'll come back and do the next layer. And there we go. That's the main pattern. So again, these colours are in no way accurate, so don't worry about what recipes I use to mix these. Literally, they're just for a demo, so I just mixed up 2 blues and 2 grey colours. So yeah, they are not accurate. So let's get on to the highlight layers. Now, I'm pushing my luck a little bit with these because I'm not actually leaving the paint to cure for long enough. I'm literally going step after step after step. During the normal build process, I would imagine that you're going to have a lot more time in between what I'm doing on this demo, but I've never had paint lift with these masks. The grade of vinyl is very high quality. It's automotive grade. They use it for painting cars and high-end equipment, stuff like that. So I'm going to chance it. Never had the issue before. I've done a few of these sort of high-speed demos. Never had paint lift, so I'm just going to crack on. Right, so they may show up, but basically the next step, if you're doing the 4-tone colour, is to pick dealer's choice. You can do the blue highlight or the grey highlight, it doesn't matter. And the idea is, as I sort of said in the outlayer, this is you remove the masks in these segments, and then you apply it over the top, and then you spray your lightest blue colour or grey, whatever one you're doing, over the top of it. So in this instance, I would recommend weeding the unneeded masks, because it's going to make it easier to register onto the underlaying pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to weed these masks out, and then we'll apply it using the transfer sheet again and spray the next colour. Alright, so we've got these blue highlight stencils ready. You're probably getting the idea of where this is going now. After all of the endless waffling, you can start to see what those descriptions are actually meaning in real world application. So rinse and repeat, same process as applying the main pattern. It's a little bit easier because these stencils for the highlights are they're a bit less complex. So you just get your transfer sheet, transfer film, and repeat the exact same process. So squeeze it down, flip her over, remove the backing sheet, again maintaining that tight curve, which encourages the vinyl to stay on the transfer sheet. And you can see how fast I'm going with this now. Obviously, unless you've got experience doing these masks, at the risk of repeating myself, sound like a broken record, you won't be going this quickly initially, but as you get more experience, it gets easier. It really does. And you just see how quickly I did that. And now we get our main pattern, and this is where you need to take a little bit of care, a little bit of time, just to line up and get good registration. Apologies if my head's in the way now, but you want to get good registration so this highlight layer is lining up with the blue pattern, because this is the blue highlight layer. Just tweaking it ever so slightly here and there as needed. That's good enough. Set it down. Remove the transfer sheet. Roll it back. See, I had a little bit of trouble with that really thin part of the vinyl, if you can see that. I had a little bit of issue with that, convincing it to go down, but it did go down. Again, pieces there. Just rolling it back. It's probably worth mentioning also that just in general, vinyl and any masking material for that matter, whether it's masking tape or vinyl, you know, sort of regardless of the grade, will have an easier time sticking down to a smooth glossy surface than it will a slightly matted one, or a slightly rough one. So this being a matte paint and, you know, quite crudely blasted on, the surface finish isn't perfect. So the vinyl will stay down, don't get me wrong, but you would get greater adhesion on a smoother, glossier surface. Just in general, that's not necessarily just these masks. That's masking in general. All right, so that's that section. We just get the saucer part done. Again, same piece of film that I've used. This will be the 4th time using this transfer sheet. Now, when I did the demo, when I was developing these masks, I could mask the entire top of the saucer with maybe 1 or 2 cut pieces of this transfer film. So for the entire model, you can probably get it all done in maybe 1 or 2 of the A4 sheets. And like I said, I've provided 6 in the set, so there's plenty in there just to help you along the process while you're learning and getting familiar with it. Don't need those anymore. Okay, and again, just make sure I'm in frame. Apologies, I can't see the screen. And then again, just take a little bit of time, just making sure everything's lined up over the blue pattern underneath, and you're getting good registration. And there we go. Another thing that's worth mentioning, obviously these masks are designed to lay down and find their correct shape and position over compound curves and compound surfaces for the most part anyway. This area is thereabouts flat on the ship, but the saucer definitely isn't, obviously. So in this demonstration there may be a little bit of misalignment, but that's probably down to the fact that it's going down onto a flat plane where they're actually designed to go onto a curve surface, like a compound curved surface. So maybe a little bit of misalignment. It's probably due to that, so just bear that in mind. There we go. So you get where we're going with this now. They're acting like stencils, and so you get your next blue colour, the highlight colour, spray through those stenciled spaces, which I shall do now. Right, let's get these stencils off and see how we did. Now, if you're careful with these, you can keep them, and if you're mad enough to do another 650D, reuse them. Obviously, I don't need to do that, so I'm just going to get them off real quick. So as I said just a second ago, I'm doing this a really rapid fire sort of demo. So this light blue paint is literally just been sprayed. So I'm trying to be careful here that I don't damage it. Reaching over, try and not block the view here. As I said earlier, reference is key, and I'm going to leave that to you. I suppose at some point I should upload a load of reference photos to my website, because I do get asked quite regularly, but just, Google's your friend. It's not hard to find photos of the 6-foot filming model, really, especially the Generations painted version. Just do some hunting around, you'll find what you need, and yeah, there we go. Last couple of pieces. And there we go. Got everything? Yep. Right, so that's immediately made the pattern a lot more complex. So just the last thing to do now is repeat that process again with the grey highlight colour, and there we go. So I'm just going to roll on, and I don't think I'm going to show you applying the grey because you've already seen the process twice. So I'll get the masks, or I'll get the stencils prepped and the light colour sprayed on, and then come back as I'm demasking the final highlight colour. So give me 2 minutes and we'll see how we did. Last layer of grey highlights is down, so for the last time we'll pull the masks away. There we go. Go out of there. And there we go. So you get the idea. That's how you use these masks. You repeat that same methodology over the entire surface, maintaining alignment as best you can with the main pattern, and then registering the highlight masks over top. So it's worth mentioning that the more accurate you are with the positioning and placement of the main pattern, then the better the registration will be with the subsequent layers. It sort of goes without saying, but it's worth probably saying out loud just in case. Now, there are some issues with the Helios kit in that you don't have any grid lines, and I sort of addressed how to tackle that in the printed sort of cover sheet that you'll get in the masks. Sort of my advice how to tackle that best you can, particularly on the saucer, because there's nothing in the way of grid lines to help you maintain alignment, and it's a large surface, and errors will creep in which compound as you go through. So couple of tips on that in the printed material that I include in these masks, how to tackle that. And I think that's about all that's needed video wise. I hope that between the 1400 mask videos and this video there's enough information. Again, apologies I can't actually do a full painting demo, but big thanks to Andy for letting me borrow his kit, but that meant that I can't actually paint or assemble anything, obviously, because it's not my kit, and I wouldn't dream of doing so. So I think that will do it for now. If there are any questions, please let me know. Reach out to me if you've got this set. Just contact me and I'll try and help as best I can. But I think that pretty much covers it. So if you picked up a set of these masks, thanks very much. If you're planning to, then I hope this sort of assuages any fears you might have about tackling something this complex. But then again, if you're the sort of lunatic that's bought a 650 scale kit of the Enterprise D, then I think painting it is going to be the least of your problems, and you're just going to go at it with all the gusto that it deserves. So thanks very much. Thanks for watching. I've prattled on for long enough. I'll let you get on with your builds, and I'll see you soon. Thanks a lot.